All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Hawk's podcast. I am Hawk. I am your host. I'm recording this on Monday, May 26th, Memorial Day, not Labor Day. Today we're going to talk about Mahmoud Khalil and his wife, Noor Abdallah, who is a U.S. citizen. Mahmoud Khalil, most of you will remember, was a former student at Columbia University who led some pro-Palestinian protests there. He was arrested for his First Amendment constitutionally protected activities, largely at the behest of Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, at the encouragement of an organization called Canary Mission, as well as a Columbia professor named Shai Davidai, Shaidavidai. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. That's been reported. That is according to Mahmoud Khalil, and we're going to talk about that organization and that individual as well. He has been in federal detention in Louisiana for almost 3 months since being arrested. During the time he is in the United States on a valid green card. He is a green card holder. His wife is a U.S. citizen. During the time that he was in detention, his wife gave birth to their first child, a son, and the government refused to permit him to leave the federal detention center that he's being held in so that he could be present for the birth of his first child. Mahmoud Khalil has not been charged with a crime. He has not been charged with being a terrorist. He has not been charged with aiding and abetting any terrorist organization. He has not been charged with being a member of Hamas. He has not been charged with aiding or abetting Hamas or any other terrorist organization. And you can bet that if there was any evidence that he had committed any crime at all, that this presidential administration would have charged him with a crime. He has been in prison for almost 3 months and has not been charged with a crime. Multiple other student activists, pro-Palestinian student activists, who have been arrested following Mahmoud Khalil's arrest, have gone to court and have won their release and are no longer in custody. Mahmoud Khalil remains in custody, and we're going to talk about the current legal status of his litigation in his attempts to be released from prison, his immigration case, and how all of that stuff is progressing right now. But the reason that I'm talking about him and his case today, I came across an article in the New Yorker a couple of days ago that is titled "The Radical Courage of Noor Abdallah, His Wife." This is an article written by Ada Alami, Aidaalami. This article was published on May 21st, so 5 days ago. It is subtitled "How the Wife of Mahmoud Khalil Has Navigated Becoming a New Mother While Fighting for Her Husband's Freedom." And there are sections of this article that I'm just going to read, and within the article, the author references some things, and I went and dug up a bunch more information on some of those things, so I'm going to skip around a little bit in this episode, but I want to cover all of those. I want to cover all of that stuff because I think it's very important. First of all, man, you know, I have to preface everything that I am going to say with the following things, which again will not prevent me from being called anti-Semitic. The things that I'm about to say will not prevent me from being referred to as someone who hates the idea of Israel, the existence of the Israeli state, who hates Judaism and who hates the Jewish people. I assure you that I do not hold any of those beliefs. But if there is one thing that I have learned about Zionists is if you criticize them or Israel or the Israeli government and its policies or the Israeli military and its policies, even the slightest amount, you will be labeled immediately as anti-Semitic. And I think that the campaign of Zionists since October 7th, 2023, to label literally every single fucking person who criticizes anything as anti-Semitic or engaging in anti-Semitism has done an incredible disservice to the actual definition of those words. It has been the Zionists who have completely robbed those words of their actual meanings. And it's the boy who cried wolf, man. It's like if you label every single person who criticizes any little tiny thing as a full-blown anti-Semite, that word has no meaning anymore. And that, to me, is tragic because we are now existing in the United States with a president who has staffed his administration with people who are openly white supremacist, openly anti-Semitic, and while proclaiming to be the protectors of Israel, the Israeli state, the Israeli government, the Israeli military. That having been said, Hamas is a terrorist organization, and I condemn Hamas entirely, without equivocation, without exception. Hamas is a terrorist organization and deserves to be eradicated from the face of the earth. I do not in any way, shape, or form view them as a legitimate governing body within the Gaza Strip. I do not view members of Hamas as freedom fighters or resistance fighters. They are terrorists and they are murderers. And I feel exactly the same way about the Israeli military and the current Israeli government. They are terrorists, occupiers, and murderers. They have slaughtered tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians inside the Gaza Strip. They have murdered tens of thousands of elderly Palestinians, women and children. They have bombed hospitals. They have bombed schools that were full of children, hospitals that were full of patients. I've seen countless videos of members of the Israeli Defense Forces gleefully murdering Palestinians inside the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. I am very much looking forward to seeing Louis Theroux's new documentary called The Settlers, about Israeli settlers in the West Bank. What is happening in the Gaza Strip is a genocide, and that is expanding into the West Bank with the full support of the Israeli government, the Israeli military, and the United States government. Today is Memorial Day, and I did a TikTok earlier today where it's like, I don't even know what the fuck Memorial Day is supposed to be for anymore. I don't know what patriotism means anymore. Because last night before I went to bed, I saw images of little children being bombed and murdered by the Israeli military using weapons that were manufactured here in the United States that we gave them for free. So what the fuck is Memorial Day anymore? What does patriotism even mean anymore? And lump anti-Semitism into it, again, who gets to define these words anymore? Who gets to define this language. Anyway, what Hamas did on October 7th, 2023 was a terrorist attack. Full stop. Full stop. It was a terrorist attack. It was Israel's 9/11. And Hamas should be fucking obliterated from the face of the earth. In the United States, following October 7th, 2023, there erupted multiple protests on the campuses of elite schools, Ivy League schools, including Columbia University in New York City. And immediately, pretty much everybody in the media, every Democrat, every Republican, labeled every single one of those college protesters who were protesting in favor of the lives and the rights of Palestinian civilians who were being slaughtered. All of those students had a giant blanket laid over them by our media and by our government, and they were all labeled as pro-terrorist, pro-Hamas. They were asking for children to stop being murdered. That makes you a terrorist in the United States in 2024 and 2025. Please stop murdering children. Please stop bombing elementary schools while they are full of elementary school aged children. That makes you a terrorist in 2024 and 2025. I cannot tell you the number of people in the media for whom I had a tremendous amount of respect say that exact thing, that all of these student protesters are pro-Hamas. All of these student protesters are pro-terrorist. All of these student protesters are aiding and abetting terrorism. And it made me fucking sick, and it still does. Since October 7th, 2023, on TikTok, on YouTube, on social media, I have been called an anti-Semite, and I've been called anti-Semitic every single fucking day, because I have said we should stop murdering children with weapons made in this country. That makes me anti-Semitic and a terrorist, according to Zionists, according to elected Republicans and elected Democrats, and according to the vast majority of the media in the United States. Stop murdering children. I'm sure that every single one of these protests, they're college kids. I'm sure that every one of them had a few or several members who probably actually were pro-Hamas and were probably holding signs that said they were pro-Hamas. And that doesn't give you the right to blanket and label every single person who is against this conflict and who supports the rights and the lives of Palestinian civilians, the elderly, men and women and children. That doesn't give you the right to label all of those people as pro-Hamas supporting terrorists. It just doesn't. And it's the most intellectually fucking lazy shit that I've seen in a very long time. It's the most intellectually lazy shit that I've seen in a very long time. If you want to talk about individuals, then talk about individuals. But because you have certain individuals within a huge group that are assholes, you don't get to label the entire fucking group as those kinds of assholes. You just don't. You just don't. Not every single Trump supporter is a racist or a Nazi, but every racist and every Nazi in the United States voted for Donald Trump in 2024. Does that mean that I get to label every single Republican in the United States as a fucking racist Nazi? No, it doesn't. And I would never presume to do that because I'm not a fucking moron. It's just so fucking intellectually lazy, I can't even explain it to you. Anyway, it's elementary school aged children are being blown to smithereens with weapons made in the United States that we gave to the Israeli government and the Israeli military for free. I apologize if I get a little worked up when speaking about that and my feelings about that. And the fact that when I do speak my feelings about that, I immediately get labeled as an anti-Semitic supporter of Hamas and terrorism. It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. Anyway, again, the title, excuse me, of this article from the New Yorker, published May 21st, 2025, and written by Aida Alami. The radical court. I'm getting ready to say her first name, and that's causing me to mispronounce the word courage. The radical courage of Noor Abdallah, how the wife of Mahmoud Khalil has navigated becoming a new mother while fighting for her husband's freedom. She's fighting for her husband's freedom, a man who has not been charged with a single criminal act. He is a political prisoner, flat out. So last Sunday, today's Monday, so a week ago yesterday, Noor Abdallah drove from her apartment in Morningside Heights to St. Paul and St. Andrew United Methodist Church on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. She was with her sister and her month-old son, Dean, and they spell their son's name Deen, who was born while his father is in prison on no criminal charge whatsoever. The occasion was an alternative graduation ceremony for students at colleges and universities in New York who had been expelled or suspended for protesting Israel's war in Gaza. Inside the church, preparations were underway with photographs of the protests projected on a far wall and signs hung elsewhere that read, "War criminals off our campus," and "Free Palestine." And let me just say, for me personally, free Palestine. Abdallah made her way to the pastor's office where she left Dean sleeping soundly in his stroller. "Honestly, he's a really good baby," Abdallah said, who is 28. "Obviously, I'm biased. I'm his mom, but he's really good. You know, as long as he's fed, he's happy." Abdallah is a dentist who grew up in Flint, Michigan. She is a U.S. citizen. Her husband is Mahmoud Khalil, a man of Palestinian descent who recently graduated from Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs, and he is a permanent green card holder. He was arrested in March during Ramadan as the couple returned to their apartment after iftar, and he is currently being held in an ICE detention center in Louisiana. So let's talk about that for a second. A lot of these students who are being arrested across the country are being taken to a federal holding center in Louisiana. Why is that? Because Louisiana is in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals encompasses Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. The judges who currently sit on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals make our current Supreme Court look like a bunch of liberal squishes. That's why they are all being taken to Louisiana. Mahmoud Khalil had been worrying for days that authorities were after him. This was before he was arrested. He was the subject of a doxing campaign on social media, with one Columbia professor asking Secretary of State Marco Rubio to take strong action. We're going to talk about that professor in a moment. But as Khalil and Abdallah walked home that night, Khalil seemed calm. That was the first night he was like, "I'm being dramatic. Nothing is going to happen." Shortly after reaching the lobby of their building, Mahmoud Khalil was handcuffed and led away. Abdallah was 8 months pregnant. She has not seen him in person since. Again, no criminal charges. In the weeks that followed, at least 78 more students were arrested as part of the university's wider crackdown on anti-war protests. In April, last month, Abdallah's water broke. A friend assisted her during her first contractions. Her mother, who was set to fly in from Michigan that day, arrived a few hours earlier than planned to ensure that she could be with her daughter at Lenox Hill Hospital when the baby was born. Khalil and Abdallah had narrowed a list of names down to 3. They chose the word Dean. Abdallah wasn't sure if Khalil... That's the name they picked. Khalil is one of several pro-Palestinian... There are parts of the article that I'm going to skip. Khalil is one of several pro-Palestinian voices at U.S. colleges and universities who have been detained since the start of the second Trump administration. Rumeysa Öztürk, a Turkish doctoral student and a Fulbright scholar at Tufts University, was arrested in April because she co-authored an op-ed about Gaza. She wrote an article about Gaza, and Marco Rubio had her arrested. She was the woman who we saw the video of her being approached by 6 masked ICE agents, no badges, no uniforms, masks, hats, sunglasses, a young woman by herself on the street, approached by multiple masked men and being forced into a van. And I did a TikTok about this a while ago. How long until we see groups of men dressing like this who aren't ICE agents, who have a van, start abducting young women off of the street, saying, we're ICE agents, you have to come with us? No badges, no warrants, no nothing. Just abducted off the fucking street by a bunch of men and thrown into the back of a van. Because she wrote an article that Marco Rubio didn't like. Well, she wrote an article that an organization called Canary Mission didn't like. And Canary Mission allegedly fed her personal information to Marco Rubio and asked that she be arrested. That's what I've seen reported. I don't know if that's true or not, allegedly. Khalil remains in custody as the federal judge assigned to his case has not yet ruled on either a bail motion or a motion for preliminary injunction. Such a ruling could come at any time. Meanwhile, so there was a hearing this past Thursday in his case. We're going to talk about that in a moment. While Khalil's case drew international attention, his wife has had to grapple with the anxieties of learning how to be a mother. There have been sleepless nights. Meanwhile, she constantly checks her phone for updates on her husband. I put on a good face for people, she told the author. I'm trying really hard not to go into a little dark hole of sadness. Khalil and Abdallah met in Lebanon, where Abdallah, as a college student, spent a month volunteering with an education nonprofit. Her parents had moved to the United States from Syria, her father for a medical residency, and her mother came later to teach Arabic. Mahmoud Khalil grew up in a refugee camp in Syria. He had been displaced to Lebanon when he was 18 after the outbreak of the Syrian civil war. He taught himself English while working with Syrian refugees in Lebanon and went on to earn a degree in computer science from the Lebanese American University in Beirut. When Abdallah traveled there as a volunteer, Khalil was her main point of contact on the ground. Khalil once told her that he wouldn't marry before the age of 40, but in the years that followed, their friendship devolved, and in 2023, they were married. Studying at Columbia, the home of such Palestinian scholars as Edward Said and Rashid Khalidi, who wrote this book, The 100 Years War on Palestine, A History of Settler Colonialism and Resistance, 1917 to 2017. It's a New York Times bestseller. I'm reading it right now. I think a lot of us have read that book over the last year and a half. But going to Columbia, where Rashid Khalidi and Edward Said are professors, had always been a dream of Mahmoud's. He was admitted into the University School of International Public Affairs in 2022, but he couldn't afford to attend. The following year, he got a scholarship and enrolled that January, 9 months before Hamas launched its terror attack in southern Israel. On October 7th, 2023, Israel's response, an invasion of Gaza that has killed, it's probably killed at least 200,000 or 300,000 people. It sparked waves of rallies at Columbia. Khalil, known for his charisma and conciliatory manner, eventually became a mediator, representing the protesters in talks with the university's administrators. That was his fucking crime. That was his crime in the eyes of our government, with our Constitution, with our First Amendment. That was his crime. He made a point of not covering his face during the demonstrations. We've talked about the mask thing, Abdallah told the Times in March. He always tells me, what am I doing wrong that I need to be covering my face for? Do you hear that, ICE agents? This college kid has more fucking balls than you do. What am I doing wrong that I need to be covering my face for? You hear that, Kristi Noem? You hear that, Stephen Miller? You hear that, Marco Rubio, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance? What am I doing wrong that I need to be covering my face for? Fucking hate these people. On March 5th, 24 students had staged a sit-in at Barnard College demanding reversal of suspensions of classmates who had participated in an earlier protest. A day after the arrests at Barnard, a pro-Israeli professor named Shai Davidai, who had been temporarily barred from the Columbia campus for threatening behavior against protesters, posted a video of Mahmoud Khalil during the demonstration, quote, illegally taking over a college in which you are not even enrolled. He was enrolled. And distributing terrorist propaganda should be a deportable offense. No, he wrote, quote, because that's what Mahmoud Khalil from Columbia did yesterday at Barnard College. The post was directed at Marco Rubio. 2 days later, ICE agents arrested Mahmoud Khalil. I'm going to skip the rest of this article, and we're going to talk about the current legal disposition of where he's at. And then we're going to talk about Canary Mission. We're going to talk about that professor who tweeted at Marco Rubio to basically have him arrested, and 2 days later he was arrested. And then we're going to talk about Rashid Khalidi, the author of this book. So Mahmoud Khalil's current legal status is there's a lot going on. There are immigration removal proceedings that are going on. He has challenged his unlawful detention. An immigration judge in Louisiana has ruled that he is deportable, but that decision is being appealed. He's being deported and is being classified as deportable because there's a very old federal law that allows the Secretary of State to just single individual people out and say, you are a threat to the foreign policy objectives of the United States of America, so I'm ordering you out of the country. That is being appealed. The constitutionality of that statute, I don't think, has ever been challenged. I'm sure it will be challenged shortly. So he's currently being held in Louisiana. He's got a couple of appeals going. The government has a couple of appeals going. He had asked the government, he had asked the judge to terminate his deportation proceedings last Thursday. That was denied. During the same hearing, the judge denied a government motion that would have prevented Khalil from raising an asylum claim, according to Khalil's attorneys, and also denied a motion from Khalil's attorneys to postpone the hearing date to a later date and to subpoena witnesses. At the hearing that took place last Thursday, witnesses testified. Mahmoud Khalil took the stand in his own defense. The judge has invited both sides to submit written closing arguments by June 2nd. And then the judge will then rule on whether or not Khalil can be deported from the United States, and if he is entitled to any form of relief that would enable him to remain in the country with his wife and his kid. But, said one of his attorneys, the immigration judge is not an independent judge. She is an employee of the Department of Justice. She serves at the pleasure of the president. She is subject to political pressure by the government. We have seen firsthand what Donald Trump is doing with this current Department of Justice. He's giving them orders as the president of the United States, and Pam Bondi is following those orders. She issued a goddamn memo to every single employee of the Department of Justice of the United States of America demanding that they stop using paper straws, because it is the policy of this administration that we will use plastic straws. It's a bad Monty Python movie if people like Mahmoud Khalil and his family weren't being hurt in this way, along with Andre and Kilmar Abrego Garcia and all of the people who were sent to that fucking hellhole prison, CCOT, in El Salvador with no due process. So his legal proceedings are continuing. And so what's today? 26. So the written closing arguments from counsel are due in about a week, and then we should be getting some decisions from these judges. Now, let's talk about this organization, Canary Mission. Canary Mission is an anonymously run doxing website established in 2014 that publishes the personal information of students, professors, and organizations that it describes as anti-Israel or anti-Semitic, focusing primarily on people at North American universities. Critics have described it as weaponizing the accusation of anti-Semitism in order to silence any and all criticisms of Israel. If you go to their website, there is a search bar at the top, and it's populated with words that kind of rotate. And it says, search for a student, search for a professor, search for a professional, search for a medical professional. Canary Mission has an absolutely massive database of everyone who has protested against Israel's apartheid state, it's Israel's occupation of the West Bank, the Israeli military actions inside the Gaza Strip, and anything and everything having to do with the policies of the Israeli government or the Israeli military. If you do that publicly, Canary Mission will target you, allegedly, and will gather any and all information that they can find on you. It's an anonymous organization, but their information has been used by Israeli military, Israeli intelligence, and I have not been able to confirm whether or not this is actually true, but I saw some commentators saying that it is basically an extension of Israeli military that is operating within the United States and is being funded through donations of charitable foundations inside the United States, including one that was that is located here in San Francisco, where I live. So anybody who protests against Zionism, the Israeli government, the Israeli military, protests in support of the rights and lives of Palestinian civilians, this organization has a pattern of targeting those individuals, publishing their photographs on their website, providing all of their personal information on their website, and providing all of that information to the employers of those people, and making an online record of that for these individuals, which no doubt is going to potentially have a negative impact on their abilities to remain employed or find new employment if they get fired. For exercising your constitutionally protected First Amendment rights in the United States of America. Excuse me, the United States of AIPAC. Canary Mission's published materials have been described as a blacklist. Profiles are publicly available online and intended for wide use, and Canary Mission may actively send them to employers. Known users of the profiles include Israeli intelligence organizations, Ministry of Strategic Affairs, and Shin Bet, which interrogate and deny entry to American citizens who have been targeted by Canary Mission. In March 2025, multiple foreign students with Canary Mission profiles were detained by the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. Canary Mission's work towards silencing any criticism of Israel is controversial. Hey, no shit. Israel doesn't have a First Amendment, by the way, guys. They don't have a Second Amendment either. Its tactics have been compared to McCarthyism, and the makeup and reliability of the profiles they display on their website have been questioned. According to its website, Canary Mission compiles profiles of students, professors, and organizations that, quote, promote hatred of the United States, Israel, and Jews on North American college campuses. The website has that's repetitive. Profiles are constructed using public information from social media and often contain detailed personal information such as childhood photos. Some profiles document prominent white supremacists. Props on that, I guess, including Identity Europa members. Canary Mission has removed certain profiles of people who published public apology essays on their website. Gosh, that doesn't sound anything like, what's the word I'm looking for? Extortion? Blackmail? I've seen multiple reports. Again, I have not been able to independently confirm them, that Canary Mission is feeding the Trump administration with information on students that have all been arrested by the Trump administration. But let's look at Canary Mission's profile of Mahmoud Khalil. I printed this directly from their website. He organized campus protests and acted as a mediator between campus protesters and the administration. A Department of Homeland Security spokesperson said that Khalil led activities aligned with Hamas, a designated terrorist organization. Again, did I mention that he has not been charged with a single crime? Not one. Khalil has been leading anti-Israel protests at Columbia since at least October 12, 2023, just days after Hamas's attack on Israel. That day, he led a rally where activists, not him, other people, chanted "From the river to the sea," a slogan condemned by the U.S. House of Representatives as anti-Semitic and used by Hamas as a call for Israel's destruction. Other people, not him. Khalil is a leader of the Columbia University Apartheid Divest Group and the current home for Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace, after they were suspended for pro-terror activities. What do you think Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace did that qualifies as pro-terror activities? They spoke. Yeah, they spoke. They utilized their constitutionally protected First Amendment rights in the United States of America. Zionists fucking hate when people do that. And so they go to the United States government and say, these people need to be arrested right now. And Marco Rubio's like, fuck yeah, let's arrest them. Anyway, that Columbia professor, Shai Davidai, I really hope I'm not butchering that. His name's spelled Shai Davidai. He doesn't look unhinged at all. What the fuck? He's an untenured Columbia University business professor who recently was denied access to the campus. His parents are both Israeli and are incredibly wealthy. His dad is an arms manufacturer. Cool. While the student protests were going on, he tweeted the following. Let's take off the gloves. Terrorism is an ideology. He's speaking about the student protesters. They are openly supporting terror. They are terrorists. These are not kids. These are adults. He was denied access to Columbia's campus on 2 occasions because of his overt harassment of student protesters. He tweeted to Marco Rubio about Mahmoud Khalil, and 2 days later, Mahmoud Khalil was arrested, and this dickhead supported Mahmoud Khalil's arrest, but also expressed grave concern as to whether or not Mahmoud Khalil would get a fair trial. Fuck you. Anyway, one of the main reasons that Mahmoud Khalil wanted to go to Columbia is because that is the teaching home of Rashid Khalidi, who wrote this book, The 100 Years' War on Palestine. He retired from teaching in October 2024 on the anniversary of October 7th. And he stepped down accepting Professor Emeritus status, I think, because he, quote, I don't want to be a cog in this machine anymore. There's a really good article in The Guardian dated October 8th, 2024. It's a very long article about him. I will have my brother put the link for that in the show notes. He turned 76. I mean, listen to this paragraph. Rashid Khalidi turned 76 in 2024. He is the same age as the state of Israel. And this incident was the latest example of what has been happening to Palestinians since the founding of Israel. In his words, systematic, massive dispossession and theft. And there was a reference in this article. Oh, here we go. Professor Khalidi's grandfather lost the family home in Jaffa in the Nakba, which translates to the catastrophe. That is when Israelis drove Palestinians out of Palestine to establish the Israeli state. He lost the family home in Jaffa in the Nakba, or catastrophe, the mass displacement and dispossession of Palestinians during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. His family scattered. At the time, his parents went to New York, where his father went on to finish his education. Unable to return to Palestine, they stayed in New York, where Rashid was born. At Yale University, Khalidi was a part of the class of 1970, along with George W. Bush, who was a senior at the time. Anyway, and then there's what happened on October 7th. Quote, there were two things that were taking place at the same time. The horrors of that day shocked people for weeks. And then there were those who said the chickens had come home to roost. They were, of course, punished. Those who said an explosion was inevitable when you impose a brutal occupation or blockade on people for 4 or 5 generations. Alongside that, people started to see a genocide being played out and were watching it in real time on their phones, on TikTok. That had a profound effect. What did he make of the shift that took place immediately after October 7th when young people around the world rose up in support of Palestine and Palestinians? Quote, understanding the traumatic experience of Israelis is essential to understanding what is going on now. I read that correctly. And also what else it might do. And I also think people say a dead child is a dead child. On the one side, you have a dozen or 2 dozen dead children. On the other side, you have thousands of dead children. And if you are angry about this, you have to be outraged about that. That it wasn't the case with the media or politicians, well, that was noticed. Within a couple of weeks, there were as many Palestinians dead as dead Israelis on October 7th. But somehow the deaths of Israelis were more horrifying, more atrocious, and the rank racist hypocrisy behind those attitudes is now quite stark for many people. The impact of the protests at universities is likely to be felt for some time. I didn't want to be a cog in this machine anymore, he said. For some time now, I have been both disgusted and horrified by the way higher education has developed into a cash register, essentially a money-making MBA, lawyer-run hedge fund come real estate operation with a minor sideline in education where money has determined everything, where respect for pedagogy is at a minimum, he said. Research that brings in money they respect, but they don't care about teaching, even though it is the students with their tuition who provide a huge portion of private universities with their budgets and funding. He says that to understand Palestine, you have to understand British colonialism more broadly. He is hoping to examine key figures in the British aristocracy whose Irish experience was central to everything they did afterwards. People such as Arthur James Balfour, Sir Charles Tygart, and General Sir Frank Kitson. He is hoping to show how the Irish experience was exported to India, Egypt, Palestine, and then returned to Ireland again during the Troubles, having been magnified in the colonies. Everything comes back to fucking British colonialism, man. It's astonishing how personnel and counterinsurgency techniques like torture, assassination, find their roots with the British in Ireland. This is what drives me. Israel cannot do any of this, killing this number of Palestinians without the U.S. and Western European countries. The U.S. gives Israel the green light. It is a party to the war on Palestine. That is what drives me as an American. He was born here. I am not just at this because I am a Palestinian. It is because I am an American, because we are responsible. Thank you for listening and watching. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to see future episodes, please click like. Please leave a comment. And please subscribe to my page. It is free to do so. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Hawk. I'm grateful for everyone who follows me. Thank you, and please be safe this week.